Moving on, the next item on our agenda is a series of time-scheduled appointments. We will be receiving several presentations to be followed by a public hearing with regard to a town meeting warrant article to ban polystyrene and the potential impact of that on the school department. By way of background, citizen petitioners have requested that an article be placed on the annual town meeting warrant, which prohibits the dispensing of prepared food in disposable food service containers made from expanded polystyrene in Shrewsbury. Mr. Collins and Ms. Nichols have prepared a presentation addressing the potential impacts of the passage of this warrant article that the passage would have on Shrewsbury Public Schools. We also have the petitioners with us here tonight who will be making a brief presentation to the school committee as well. We're going to hear first from Ms. Nichols and Mr. Collins, and then from the petitioners. Following each presentation, I'm going to give members of the school committee the opportunity to ask questions as you prefer. And once that portion of the agenda has concluded, we will then open a public hearing so that members of the community who are with us tonight may express their views to the committee. Following the conclusion of that hearing, members of the committee may have offer comments as they wish. However, I do want to note that we do have another regularly scheduled school committee meeting before town meeting. That's going to take place next Wednesday night, May 16th. This topic will also appear on the agenda for that meeting as well. So if school committee members would like time to reflect on the information and presentations made tonight, they may do so. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Collins and Ms. Nichols.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for taking the time to explain the process and allowed me time to queue up this presentation for all of you. And what we're going to do is, in most time-efficient manner that we could think of, is to cover several topics on the warrant article. First, some basic facts. We'll talk a little bit about the essence of the petition. Ms. Nichols will talk about the current use of Styrofoam in our cafeterias, and we'll talk about the waste disposal and recycling efforts that are currently in place, some alternatives to Styrofoam if it were to be banned, and also along with our current response plan, and then potential impact to consumers of cafeteria meals. So first, just to start, I think it's fair to say, but in self-evident, but we all care deeply about our environment. It's something that we need to be mindful of in the future. And at the same time, we are not sitting here as environmental experts. We are not that, and so we're not going to speak about environmental impact of this warrant article because we don't have the credentials to do so. What we are going to talk about, because we are experts, is the impact if it were to pass. So we obviously work in the public school environment, serve thousands, tens of thousands of meals to school children, both breakfast and lunch on an annual basis, and it's within the context of a highly regulated environment. And it's not only regulated by the federal and state government in terms of our operation, but the other context is, and this is really speaks to this next slide, is that what we do is we operate in a unique environment, serving large quantities of meals in an institutional setting, and we are not like, and should not be compared to, restaurants or higher education or other cafeteria-like programs, because it would just not be a fair comparison. What we operate in is an environment that has limited financial resources, very limited space in our schools, and short time frames to provide meals. And of course, some of our students are here, know this very well, and if you've had children go through the school system, 25-minute lunch period is, the purpose is to serve as a nutritious meal as possible in a short period of time and fit that into the context of an overall school day. The petition itself, just a couple of highlights, is the way that it is written. Of course, it would not take effect until January 1st, 2020, and that was intentional by the petitioners to allow some time for food establishments to respond to, plan for, and respond to in a responsible way if the ban were to pass. I know this is very difficult to read here, but this definitions section, and I know you have hard copy printouts there that you can read, it basically would ban single-use disposable products that are made of the so-called expanded polystyrene. And further down, it talks about who would be impacted, which would be all restaurants in places, including town facilities, which is the school cafeteria program. So it does impact the school cafeteria program. It's not just private businesses and restaurants. And then finally, and this is the kind of the prohibition here that I just mentioned, the disposable food products, and that we're included in this as well. So we are impacted, and that's what we're here to talk about. The last thing I want to talk about before I turn over to Mrs. Nichols is, one of our current, what has been in place for many, many years, and this is a picture from the website of Wheelabrator in Millbury, their incineration plant. They are a facility that converts waste into energy, and they provide power to thousands of homes in the town of Millbury and the surrounding area. And it was that business, of course, is set up to reduce society's dependence on landfills. So again, that kind of makes us a little bit unique in Shrewsbury in terms of our waste hauling and waste disposal. So at this point, I'll turn over to Mrs. Nichols to talk a little bit about the current use of the products.
All our dishwashers were mothballed many, many years ago in favor of disposable products. Just to put a little bit of perspective, we use over 425,000 trays a year. The majority of our products contain styrenes. Obvious products look like Styrofoam, but even our clear plastics that you would assume were plastic also have styrenes. There's no recycling market for these items. All our disposables are placed into the waste stream and hauled to Wheelabrator where they're burned. No Shrewsbury trash is sent to any landfill. Currently, we're able to recycle clean paper, cardboard, plastic milk bottles, and metal cans in the schools.
Okay, so some alternatives if the ban were to pass. First would be using substitute non-EPS styrofoam products. We actually have some samples here we're going to pass around so you can take a look at those. Further down the road, researching the feasibility of reverting back to reusables, plastic washable trays, plastic drinking cups and utensils, and then finally researching the products and the feasibility of diverting them to some sort of compost or landfill facility if we were to use compostable products and not reusables. Obviously, each of these alternatives comes with some increased cost and impact. And I just want to pause here a little bit because one of the major pieces that we deal with, and I mentioned earlier, is space limitations. So just an example, Patton School, if you were to look at that kitchen area right now, there is literally no space for a dishwasher. As enrollments increased across the district, we add portable classrooms and the number of children, and the need in our kitchen spaces for additional food storage, both cold and warm storage, warmers to keep the food at the correct temperature for serving. There's just no space for dishwashing facilities at Patton School as it currently exists. So that's just one of our obstacles. And I think the same could probably be said for Shrewsbury High School. That school was designed for just over 1,450 students, and of course we have now over 1,800. And what was a space that had been allocated for dishwashing has been converted for food storage. So space is a major obstacle, along with a number of other pieces around kind of that reusable piece. So that's what I'm referencing here is just an example of cost impact for that particular type of alternative. So our response plan would be, the premise being here, no additional resources. Our response plan would be to use substitute products and pass along the cost to the consumer. and other alternatives if they were feasible. Of course, the dishwashing example that I just gave you comes with a significant capital costs, operating costs for dishwashing equipment, maintenance, chemicals, utilities, both water and electricity to maintain the proper washing and rinsing temperatures, which are mandated by health code, and then, of course, staffing. And so those would be some of the other cost impacts along the way. So our immediate no additional resources response would be the use of substitute products. And Mrs. Nichols will talk a little bit about what those costs look like.
The next slide was just a comparison.
As you're doing that, I'm going to actually just hand out a couple of these so
Okay.
they can take a look at them.
So I just did a broad sampling of some of the products and just projected cost. And if you look at the Styrofoam products, we're spending about $20,400 on these products a year. If we switch to non-styrenes just on these products, we'd be looking at over $44,000 a year. So just on these products alone, we'd probably be increasing our costs about $24,000. And this is just a small sampling. Styrofoam is good for either hot or cold food. Non-styrene, you specifically have to use a cold or a hot cup. They're not interchangeable. A benefit of Styrofoam, it's an insulator. It keeps cold foods cold and hot foods hot. The non-Styrofoam containers do not contain heat. We did a sampling at the high school with hot soup. It's very hot. It'd be really hard to serve that soup in the schools. The other issue, any of the products that you can see that look like clear plastic have to be stored under 70 degrees, where Styrofoam has no temperature storage. So our storage rooms in the summer are probably upwards of 90 to 95 degrees. So that's a concern, how we would handle those products.
And then finally, just kind of in closing here, if the ban were to pass at town meeting, and again, the no additional resource option would be to pass along the cost to the consumer, and likely in the range of 10 cents to 20 cents per meal. It's really too early to tell exactly what kind of recommendation we would make. It's about 2 years away. The marketplace conditions could be different, better or worse. We don't know if the demand increases, maybe price increases. If there's a flood in the market of substitute products, then maybe prices come down. We can't forecast that, but given the current pricing today, we'd probably see that somewhere in the range of 10 to 20 cents per meal. And then you have the current meal prices there just as a reference. And certainly, finally, since if the ban were to pass, it doesn't take effect till January 2020, there is a provision for an additional 6-month extension as well. That we certainly have time to further study the other options. And I think my recommendation, if the ban were to pass, would be to ask for some additional resources, whether it be within the school department budget or whether it's part of a townwide green initiative, for some outside independent assistance to evaluate the various options, because they too come with their own environmental impact. And again, as we said at the outset, we're not environmental experts. So I would like to get some assistance to guide us along the way. Certainly we know our operation. And this is one of those issues that also crosses multiple departments. So, the waste hauling and recycling efforts are not something that we manage in the school department. Those are managed by the Public Buildings Department with contracts that he secures under auspices of his department. So this is something that crosses multiple departments, and again, if we were to look at other alternatives, I would ask for additional resources, consulting to help guide through that process. So that's the information that we have. I said at the outset, this is not a pro or con kind of thing. We're just talking about impact. in terms of if the ban were to pass. And we're both happy to try to respond to any questions you have or anything about the products that were passed around.
Thank you. Colleagues, questions? Mrs. Fritz?
I think it's important to note when we talk about the summary impact, what Mr. Collins stated, you might look at that and think, well, that's not a big cost to pass on to consumers, but that's just in the schools that we know of. And like you said, there's across the town cost impact. So I agree with you. If the ban passes and it is something we have to deal with going forward, it is a issue to discuss bigger than just the school committee.
Mr. Wensky?
Yeah, no, a great presentation. Appreciate the transparency on the impact that this might have. Ultimately, the will of the town will make the decision. I think interesting to note too, and I know we talk about it in your annual presentation, that food services funds itself, right, through the fees that are collected through the food services provided to the students. So right now, there is no impact to the appropriated budget or the budget that we discuss every year. And really to compare school cafeterias with restaurants, I agree with you. I mean, it's hard to do that, where you're servicing, 6,200 students across all grade levels in 25 minutes. That's a challenge. So I think, obviously there's risk, right? And I think it's important to present the risk to the town, in understanding what this will impact in terms of passing along any potential increase in operational costs. So thank you very much.
Dr. McGee?
So were either of you in the district when they made the move from washing things and, using the...
I was at Floral. It was the only dishwasher in place when I started about 20 years ago. It was so labor intensive, and we were floundering financially then. We decided to eliminate the dishwasher then, and it was also old, and it needed constant repairs, and it finally got to, we couldn't repair it anymore. So at that point, because of the labor, the cost of replacing it, we did away with the dishwasher.
You know what other districts are doing, how they're handling it at all?
A combination.
Where there is
a combination. Some are going back to dishwashers. Some had dishwashers in place. I think there's a move to compost. I mean, that would be probably the ideal goal.
Okay. Thank you.
I would just add to that too, that I think, from thinking back and reading back just in a very cursory way, it was about 20 years ago where these products that you see, like that black styrofoam tray, were marketed to school departments who were struggling financially for the reasons stated, and was seen as a very cost-effective way to assist school cafeteria operations. Of course, these are, and I use the term, they're nickel operations. The margins are so thin that, when you have to have a $2,000 repair in your dishwasher, that hurts financially. So I think you saw the shift about 20 years ago in many, many school districts away from dishwashing into the disposable products. And, not only are, the staffing pieces around dishwashing, can be costly, but those positions are also sometimes very difficult to fill. They're usually low-paying jobs at hours that aren't great, and so that's just another aspect of, I think, what the dynamic that we saw from 20 years ago to now.
Thank you.
Mrs. Gonzalo?
Yeah, this is a lot more complex than I thought when it first showed up in our book, so thank you. And I look forward to hearing the next group. But one of my, it's going to be off the top of your head, really. I was concerned about how the plastic or these alternative products might have to be in climate controlled because they have to be under 70 degrees. What would we do? Like, how would we manage that in buildings that tend not to be air conditioned? The majority of them are not.
We couldn't serve some of the products we serve. It'd have the most impact at the high school.
Okay.
Where we do, a lot of the grab and goes, the salad bowls. We'd have to look at alternatives. But it's, you know, they're great because they have a cover. They're, you know, they're appealing to a student. I don't know if we can replace all of those at this point.
Okay, because of the sensitivity, the temperature sensitivity.
Further questions, colleagues? Okay, thank you for your
Okay.
presentation.